Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world.
Yeah, and today we're looking at a system that most people think is pretty straightforward.
Right. Because archaeology is often presented as a science of recovery.
Exact.
Fragments are measured.
Sites are cataloged.
Objects are dated. The past, we are told, is uncovered.
Yeah, right, like it's just sitting there. But Michael Shanks challenges that framing entirely.
Because what we call the past does not simply sit beneath the soil, waiting patiently to be revealed.
No, it doesn't. It's assembled,
Selected.
framed.
Archaeology in this sense is not just excavation. It is composition.
Which is, a pretty radical way to look at it if you're used to the standard view.
Totally. And that's the core of our deep dive today. We're getting into Shanks's 1992 book, Experiencing the Past, on the character of archaeology.
And it's important to clarify right up front, this isn't a textbook on how to properly hold a trowel.
Right.
It's a philosophical exploration of what it actually means to dig.
What it means to pull something out of the ground and call it history.
Yeah, because the design of archaeology as a modern discipline reflects a deeper institutional tension.
And that tension is really the mission of this deep dive. We want to unpack why the past is not this neutral archive, but actually a political battleground.
On one side of this tension, you have scientific rationalism.
Right. The hierarchy, the classification, the order.
Exactly. And on the other side, you have interpretation, imagination, narrative.
So Shanks is writing this in the early 90s, pushing back against what he sees as a very rigid orthodoxy.
He's advocating for an embodied archaeology, one that includes, feeling, sensory experience, and the politics of how we make meaning.
To really see the architecture of meaning-making. Because how we look at history changes the history we see.
It really does. And to expose this divide, Shanks uses a brilliant metaphor. He sets up a contrast between trees and gardens.
Okay, let's dive right into that. Part 1, trees versus gardens. I love a good metaphor, but let's establish the baseline first.
Yeah.
What is the tree representing here?
The tree represents the dominant view in Anglo-American archaeology at the time.
New orthodoxy.
Right. Sometimes called processual archaeology or the new archaeology.
New archaeology. It sounds very mid-century modern.
Yeah, it really gained traction in the 1960s, and you have to understand what they were reacting against to see why they loved the tree so much.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Before the 60s, archaeology was a bit of a gentleman's club. It was very anecdotal.
Like guys in tweed smoking pipes.
Exactly. A guy would dig up a burial mound and basically say, I feel like this pot belongs to this specific ancient tribe because it kind of resembles one I saw in a museum in Paris.
So it was just vibes.
Totally vibes-based. It was highly interpretive, but not very rigorous.
And the next generation was not having it.
Not at all. The new archaeologists wanted to sit at the adults' table with the physicists and the chemists. They wanted absolute methodological hegemony.
Hegemony. That's a heavy word.
They wanted to dominate the discipline with science. They adopted something called critical rationalism.
Which means what, practically?
It's the belief that you must use strict reason to test any irrational or subjective beliefs. They were obsessed with empiricism.
So facts, data, measurements, if you can't measure it, it doesn't matter.
Right. They wanted to find general laws of human behavior. They didn't care about the specific messy story of one village. They wanted universal rules.
Like an equation for culture.
Exactly. If population density reaches level X, then agricultural shift Y must occur.
But Shanks says the flaw here is that they were trying to sanitize the past.
Yeah, they treated the past as an object to be controlled. By stripping away all the emotion and the mystery, they thought they were getting to the truth.
But they were actually just stripping away the humanity.
Precisely. And the shape of this scientific controlled system, the central metaphor Shanks uses for it, is tree thinking.
The tree represents hierarchy. You've got the trunk, the branches, the structure, the authority.
Let's break the tree down. Think about the roots first. The roots are buried deep in the ground. In archaeology, those roots are your facts, your data points, the artifacts buried in the soil.
The broken pottery, the arrowheads.
Right. Then you have the trunk. This is the central unifying theory, the academic institution, the authority.
So all the little roots have to feed up into the big trunk.
Yes. And from that trunk, you get the branches.
Which are the interpretations flowing outward.
Exactly. But notice the direction of the flow. It's strictly bottom up to the center and then top down to the public. It relies heavily on lineage and genealogy.
Right, tracing things back to a single, pure origin point.
And it implies extreme stability. A tree is solid, it's upright, it's fixed.
It's not moving anywhere.
Right. And tree thinking is all about identity. When a new archaeologist looks at an object, tree thinking demands they say, this object is a pot.
Put a label on it. Put it in a classification box.
But Shanks points out there's a heavy political subtext to tree thinking, too.
Oh, absolutely. Think about what a giant oak tree represents, especially in England.
Right, the great oaks of England.
They symbolize the established order, the aristocracy, property, ownership. The tree is a state view of history where everything has its proper subordinate place.
It's about control. But Shanks argues that this isn't how human culture actually works, so he introduces the alternative metaphor.
The garden.
The garden suggests something totally different. Growth, interconnection, unpredictability. And specifically, he borrows a term from the philosophers Deleuze and Guattari, the rhizome.
The rhizome. Okay, let's unpack that for everyone. What exactly is a rhizome in a literal sense?
Think about Wiccan grass, or weeds in your lawn, or an underground network of ginger roots.
Oh, like crabgrass, where it just spreads everywhere under the surface.
Right. Unlike a tree that grows straight up and down, a rhizome moves sideways. It moves horizontally.
It doesn't have a single trunk.
No center, no trunk, no hierarchy at all. It connects point A to point B in totally unexpected, almost anarchic ways. It just pops up where you don't expect it.
And to a tree thinker, a rhizome is a weed.
It's a threat to the order of the garden. But Shanks says this is a much better model for archaeology.
Because it changes the questions we ask.
Exactly. Instead of the tree question, which is, what is this object? The rhizome question is, what is this object connected to? Or even better, what is this object becoming?
Becoming. That's a strange word to use for an ancient rock or a broken bowl.
Because the tree view insists the past is dead and static. The rhizome acknowledges flux.
It's in motion.
Yes. It acknowledges that when you hold that ancient bowl, you are part of its network now. It's not a dead end. And Shanks uses a word here that really catches you off guard. He talks about the erotics of archaeology.
Erotics. Yeah, that definitely caught my eye. It's not a word you usually see in a text about digging up dirt.
No, but he means sensuality, desire. The rhizome isn't just about dry classification. It's about the desire to know the past, the feeling of connection.
The thrill of it. When you touch something that hasn't been touched in 1,000 years.
Right. Tree thinking tries to repress that feeling to remain objective. Rhizome thinking embraces it. It says the feeling is a valid part of the knowledge.
So this is not merely aesthetic language we're talking about here.
Not at all.
It reflects competing systems of knowledge production. One insists on stability, the other acknowledges flux. And archaeology, as a discipline, lives right between them.
Suspended between the two. And that tension creates a lot of anxiety in the field. Which brings us to the next big part of his critique.
Part 2. The illness of the archive. This section had some wild imagery. Shanks calls archaeologists modern-day alchemists.
It's such a perfect description. Think about the physical reality of the job. You are literally in a trench, in the mud.
Digging through ancient garbage pits.
Yeah, middens. Just centuries of decaying ruins and broken trash, base matter.
And the alchemist takes base matter, lead, dirt, and tries to transmute it into gold.
And for the archaeologist, the gold is pure knowledge, truth, historical fact.
So it's this upward purifying motion, dragging the messy past out of the mud and elevating it into the clean, brightly lit halls of a museum.
Right. But in doing so, they also take on another role. The archaeologist as pharmacologist. The doctor.
Okay, so if the archaeologist is a doctor in a white lab coat, who is the patient?
The past is the patient, and the diagnosis is that the past is sick.
Sick with what?
Sick with dirt, sick with decay, sick with disorder. To the scientific mind, context is often seen as a contamination.
So what's the cure?
Method. The scientific method is the remedy. By applying strict procedures, they cure the object of its context. They scrub it clean, they bag it, they make it a sterile specimen.
But Shanks points out the tragic irony here.
Yeah, the fatal side effect. In curing the object, they often kill the very thing that made it interesting in the first place.
They kill its life, its smell, its deep connection to the earth it came from.
Exactly. And Shanks says this all stems from a deep, almost neurotic fear of decay.
He uses the term excremental culture.
Yeah, our modern culture is obsessed with holding on to things. We refuse to let things rot.
We build museums as vaults against death.
Right. And archaeology itself, he argues, is a form of necromancy.
Raising the dead. Because when you excavate, you are literally creating a hole in the ground, a hollow.
The past is gone. It's a void. And we frantically try to raise the dead to fill that empty space.
Which brings up the story of the antiquary, the collector.
Right. So scientific archaeologists usually look down on private collectors. They see them as amateurs who just fetishize pretty objects like an old vase while ignoring all the important data.
But Shanks turns that around on the scientist, doesn't he?
He completely flips it. He says the collector is holding that vase to fill the gap of the missing past. It's a fetish against loss. But the scientific archaeologist is doing the exact same thing.
They're just fetishizing the data instead of the beauty of the vase.
Exactly. They are both just trying to stabilize a world that is inherently unstable. They're terrified of the void.
So they use the tree model to create an illusion of permanence. But this illusion isn't harmless. And this is where the book hits hardest for me. Part 3. The politics of identity. Because the incentives shaping archaeology are not purely academic.
No, they're deeply political.
Ownership of artifacts becomes ownership of history. And the debate over the tree versus the rhizome actually ruins people's lives. Let's talk about the Mashpee example.
This is a crucial legal case Shanks brings up. The Mashpee are an indigenous people in Massachusetts, and they went to court suing for land rights.
And to win their ancestral land back, they had to legally prove they were a quote-unquote tribe.
Right. And here is where tree thinking enters the courtroom. The U.S. legal system demanded a tree definition of culture.
They wanted the roots, the trunk, the branches.
They required the Mashpee to demonstrate continuous, unbroken leadership and a completely distinct, unchanging culture from the 17th century all the way to the present day.
They wanted them to be a static artifact.
Exactly. But the reality of survival for the Mashpee looked very different. It looked like a rhizome. Over hundreds of years, to survive colonization, they adapted.
They intermarried with other communities.
Yes, they adopted new religions, many became Christians, they changed their leadership styles to navigate the world around them.
They were in flux. They were moving horizontally, making new connections.
They were living. But because they didn't look like the pure, static, unbroken trunk of a tree, the court ruled against them.
The court said, because you adapted, you are no longer a tribe. You don't exist.
It's devastating. And Shanks uses this to prove that this debate over how we classify history has real-world victims. Tree thinking denies existence to people who adapt and change.
It equates authenticity with fossilization.
Yeah.
If you're alive and changing, you're not real history.
Right.
And we see this exact same clash of worldviews in repatriation debates.
Yeah.
Shanks talks about the Zuni war gods.
The Ahota. These are incredibly powerful wooden figures carved by the Zuni people in New Mexico.
And for a long time, Western museums loved collecting these.
Oh, museums hoarded them. They put them in climate-controlled glass cases. They conserved them as specimens of Zuni art.
Fixed identity. They pinned the butterfly to the board.
Exactly. But to the Zuni, these figures are not art objects, and they certainly aren't specimens. They are living entities.
And their physical purpose is to decay.
Yes. They are placed in open-air shrines, specifically so they can be exposed to the rain and the wind. They are meant to rot back into the earth. That act of decay is what releases their power to protect the community.
So by quote-unquote saving them, the museum is actively destroying their purpose.
Conservation becomes destruction. The glass case kills the meaning because the meaning requires decay.
These repatriation debates reveal something so important. Material remains are not neutral.
Not at all. They stabilize identity. They authorize memory. They legitimize belonging.
When an object moves from a museum back to a community, it is not just relocated. It is reinterpreted.
Exactly. The past is not recovered. It is mobilized.
And this mobilization happens everywhere, not just in museums or courts. Shanks has a really interesting take on the heritage industry, doesn't he?
Yeah, he talks about places like the Beamish Museum.
The places where you pay to watch people in period costumes churn butter.
Right. Historical reenactment villages. Now, usually, academic archaeologists despise these places.
Because they think it's just fake, sanitized consumption.
Right. They see it as packaging the past as a commodity for leisure. It's clean, it's safe, you can buy a hot dog afterward.
But Shanks pushes back on that academic snobbery.
He does. He critiques the commercialism, sure. But he says the heritage industry actually understands something that the rigid scientists completely miss.
Which is the emotional resonance.
Yes. The power of the object to mean something in the present. He calls it symbolic exchange.
So people aren't going to these heritage sites to learn objective facts.
No, they are consuming the past to feel a sense of belonging today. They're constructing their own identity. We don't just passively have an identity based on our deep roots. We actively build it.
Using the past as a resource, Shanks calls us archaeological gardeners. We are cultivating who we are right now.
Cultivating, which brings us perfectly to part 4, the integrative moment.
So what is the crisis in perception here?
Well, we tend to assume that the past exists as a fixed archive, waiting for objective retrieval.
But what is obscured is the interpretive system through which that past is actually constructed.
We misperceive archaeology as neutral recovery.
Right, we overlook the institutional, political, and imaginative frameworks that shape what counts as history. Surface interpretation focuses on the artifacts.
But systems-level analysis reveals the architecture of meaning-making.
And Shanks illustrates this internal crisis beautifully with the story of Wallington Hall.
Yeah, this is a stately home in Northumberland, and he describes visiting it and having this totally split experience.
The split in the soul.
Exactly. On one hand, you have the private experience. You're walking through the gardens, you smell the damp earth, the plants. You feel this warm sensory connection to the people who walked there centuries ago.
The erotics of the past. The rhizome.
Right, but then you have the public experience. You read the official guidebook, and it's written in this cold, municipal gray tone. Just facts, dates, lineages, the tree. And Shanks says this split represents the modern condition. We have completely severed reasoned action, the science, the work from feeling leisure, the art, the memory.
We've decided that if we want to be taken seriously, we have to kill the feeling.
But Shanks says we don't have to choose between science as pure truth and art as pure fiction.
He proposes a new definition: archaeology as a craft.
Like a potter making a teapot.
Right, the potter works with raw physical material. The clay is real. The artifacts are real.
But the potter also uses their hands, their imagination, and their cultural background to shape that clay into something new.
Okay, make something.
Exactly. Archaeology is a dialogue with the fragments. We look at the past, and the past looks back at us.
So what outcomes does this design produce? First, the old tree system creates the illusion of neutrality. If archaeology is scientific, then its conclusions appear objective.
Even when they are deeply biased.
Second, it masks the interpretive labor of the archaeologist.
Right, but Shanks argues that interpretation is not a flaw in the system, it is this system.
The archaeologist's own position, their cultural assumptions, their imagination, their theoretical commitments, becomes part of the excavation. We are not extracting history from silence.
We are entering into dialogue with fragments.
So if the garden model, this craft model, is so much more honest about the human experience, why does the tree system persist?
Because it balances legitimacy and creativity.
Too much rationalism and archaeology becomes sterile classification.
You get a dead archive nobody cares about.
But too much imagination, and it risks losing institutional authority.
Right. You slip into fringe theories, ancient aliens, ley lines. You lose your funding and your credibility.
So the discipline oscillates.
It does. It remains suspended between tree and garden.
Between hierarchy and rhizome.
Between measurement and meaning.
And that tension is not a failure. It is structural.
It's the engine of the discipline.
Once that architecture becomes visible, archaeology looks less like extraction and more like cultivation.
Less like a vault.
More like a landscape in motion. And as the people observing that landscape, we have to realize our role. We aren't just standing outside the garden.
We're the ones walking through it, deciding what gets watered and what gets pulled as a weed.
Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a longer, audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.